So thank you everyone for being here this evening and for taking part in this process. It's something that's really important. Not only the endeavor that the school district is taking and what the work that it needs to do, but also your willingness to take part in this because it's important. For the education and just for the health of the students within the district. And so we thank you very much all for being here. We will do some introductions in a moment, but what we first want to do is just take roll call to establish a quorum. Each time that we are together, we are going to, instead of just your standard here, we're going to ask you a question and have you answer that question. So when I call your name, then you are going to
Actually, for tonight, you're going to tell which school site you're affiliated with. If you're a parent, which school site your kids go to. If you work for the district, which school site you work at. If you happen to be a community member and don't have students or don't work at a school site, let us know which school you live closest to.
Or if you had kids once upon a time where they we had someone at one of these meetings telling that his grandmother worked at one of the districts, that he didn't have kids in the district. So. All right, so Tammy Alonso. It has to happen to you.
So my name is Tammy Alfonso. I work for Santa Rosa City Schools here at the district office. I'm a substitute technician. Used to be neighboring school, Lincoln, toward the
Janelle Black.
Janelle Black. My son goes to Santa Rosa Charter School.
Allison McLeod Budlong.
Santa Rosa School in special education. I have a son at Korea. Later, before that, I went to Pioneer, and before that, I went to Cook.
Yes. Allegra Ann Bushman is not here this evening. Andrea Correa.
I am Andrea Correa. I work for Santa Rosa City Schools for the past 25 years. And I have 3 children, one of which graduated from Santa Rosa City Schools. And I have 2 current students, one 10th grader and one senior. And all of them at Pioneer. And I live near Pioneer.
So they get to walk to school.
They can if they want.
Adrian Juarez Cruz.
Mi nombre es Adrián Juárez, soy padre.
My name is Adrian Juarez. I am a parent.
He sido presidente del comité de ILAG dentro del distrito, presidente de ILAG en las escuelas también.
He's been president. He's for ELAC and also the vice president for TLAC.
Y tengo actualmente un hijo y una hija en Montgomery High School.
He has a son and daughter currently at Montgomery High School.
Y un pequeño en Santa Rosa Félix Americana.
And a small one at French American.
Gracias. Madonna Feather Cruz. Christian Diaz.
My name is Christian Diaz, and I have a daughter that goes to Albert Villas.
Aaron Geary.
I'm Erin Geary. I'm a teacher at Montgomery High School. I have a son at at Strax, and also at the Accelerated Charter. I have a daughter at Santa Rosa High School, and my kids have also gone to Proctor Terrace and the French.
Ross Hogg.
I'm Ross Hawes. I teach 6th grade Luther Burbank Elementary School. This is year 25, I think. And 26 years of coaching girls soccer at Montgomery High School. And like Allison, we both were mighty Mustangs at Cook Junior High School. And then I also attended Montgomery, and I live near, very close to Elsie Allen High School.
Kathy Hayes.
I am Kathy Hayes. I'm the admin assistant at LC Allen High School. Both my twin boys went to LC Allen and graduated from LC Allen. I live near CCLA. And I went to Doyle Park, Proctor Terrace, Slater, and Medallion.
Herman G. Hernandez.
Good afternoon, Herman G. Hernandez. And I late, it's lost, but I found this place. And
Thank you.
I do have a brand new daughter in the district. She's only 6 months old, so right now she's
So you don't need brand new to the district.
But I've been involved in the district for over 10 years now, in different capacities.
And which school will she go to?
Well, it's a
As
lottery for CCLA, but we live by CCLA, and then she will go to LCL High School.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
Anna Vallejo.
My name is Anna Vallejo. I actually went to BL Comstock and Center. I have 2 in BL currently, a first grader and a sixth grader, and then a sophomore at Pioneer High. And I actually live in the right district, so near CCLA, but I was a BL parent, so we're right.
Thank you. Catherine Howell.
And it's me. I am a teacher in the district. I think this is my 25th year. I most recently worked at Cook Middle School. I am not assigned to a school site right now. But I live probably equidistant between CCLA and LCM. I don't know which one's.
All right, Andrea Loveday Brown.
That's me. I actually live in West County and my kids go to school there, including the Special Education Consortium, but I'm here representing the local NAACP, so very invested in all the services.
Yvette Minor.
Hi, I'm Yvette Minor, and I'm not originally from here. I've been here 30 years, so I'm officially a Sonoma County. And I have 3 students that graduated from Santa Rosa High, 2 from Art Quest, 1 from the CTE program. And I currently have a 12th grader at Santa Rosa High, and he is in Art Quest.
Melissa Stewart.
Melissa Stewart, I have 3 boys that have gone through Santa Rosa City Schools, Santa Rosa Middle School, Santa Rosa High School. And on my last one, like Yvette, we have seniors right now, also in Art Quest. And I probably live kind of like a triangle between Pioneer and Santa Rosa High School. And I'm here for CHOPS team, but serving all 7th through 12th grade students in Santa Rosa City Schools.
Carrie Taylor.
Carrie Taylor, I'm a restorative specialist at Biella Elementary School. I live near Biella Elementary School and my kids have gone through all of.
Thank you. Nadia Berenice Villa.
Hi, my name is Nadia Villa. I have 3 boys, which one graduated from RCP, the other one from RUP. And I have the baby currently in middle school in Santa Rosa Middle School. And I live near Pioneer.
Janine Wilson.
I'm Janine Wilson. I'm the principal of Abraham Lincoln, and this is my 8th year at Lincoln and with the district.
And last but not least, Mr. Wolf, Ben Wolf.
Hi, Ben Wolf. I have a 3rd grader that's in the French American Charter School and an 8th grader that's at Slater Middle School, and I live very close to Rocker Terrace.
Thank you. All right, so we definitely have a quorum. We only have 1 absent, so that's good. Thank you again, all of you, for being here. We really do appreciate it. So my name is Brianna Garcia. I'm with School Services of California, and the district asked us to come and facilitate this committee for them. We are a company that works with school districts, charter schools, county offices, community colleges, all through the state of California on their business operations side of the house. My background is in facilities and a little bit of charter schools. I work for what I used to work before school services with what I like to call the 800-pound gorilla. I worked for LAUSD for 8.5 years. And so it's a different animal altogether. And then my colleague Lynette Hodson is here with me this evening, and I'll let Lynette introduce herself.
I'm Lynette Hodson, and I actually think that I've met some of you as I did some interviewed with when Lisa came on board, so I recognize some faces. Been with school services for 2 years. Before that, I spent 32 years in public schools. I was assistant superintendent of student services for about 12 years, oversight over special education. I also did 10 years as the chief business official. During that time, I did a lot of contract negotiations with labor unions. So I did a lot of facilitation. Special education was full of facilitation with facilitated IEPs and that type of thing. So I'm here to support the facilitation section of this committee. And I've been in 3 districts, and all 3 of those districts at one time or another had to make these kind of difficult decisions about the way schools are structured. So I do recognize how difficult it is, and how important it is, and I appreciate you all being here and taking your time to decision.
I just got a notification from the translator online. If everyone could speak up a little bit, because she has to translate from what she's hearing on Zoom.
Got it. We'll try to speak more clearly. So we want to talk a little bit about the committee responsibilities that brought all of you here today. And Melissa will walk you through just some group norms that we want to make sure that we establish as a whole as we go through our work together in 7 or potentially 8 meetings. But before we start walking through all of those, we have to click in one screen. Just wanted to take Superintendent Dr. Morales wasn't able to be here this evening, but Lisa August, the district's Associate Superintendent of Business Services, is here. Just wanted to give her a moment to welcome.
I said it before we got started, but thank you all so much for volunteering your time to be part of this process. It's not, these are not easy discussions to have. We wish that we were growing, and unfortunately, like many districts in the state, we are in declining enrollment. And so it's really important so that we can preserve the best resources in the best way possible to serve our students well into the future. We need to start making some really difficult decisions to consolidate some of those resources and to right size our district in many ways, not only talking about potential consolidation, but other areas as well. So we're looking to do that. And we really appreciate you being part of this process. As a reminder, we are a recommending group. All of you, I'm not on the committee. I'm here just to provide information. I'll facilitate conversations when we're bringing in staff with additional information. Taking your notes, and this, what will come out of here is a recommendation to the school board that they will take action on later. Services will cover more of that. Please let us know if you have questions or need anything on the way. As far as I've been here for almost 2 years, it's almost my 2nd year anniversary, my 3rd year in the district as far as school years. I live right in between Montgomery and Slater. So, here when I got hired with the process that Lynette facilitated. So really enjoying it. Thank you.
So the next couple slides really is talking about the committee and why all of us are here. But this is just giving you an overview of the makeup of the committee. We like to make sure that as we're pulling this together, that we're encompassing the community that's part of the district. And so that goes from having folks that are working with the district, parents, ones that are working within and around the community as well. There are several of you here that are wearing multiple hats. And so we welcome just all of those different perspectives as we're having these conversations and we're moving this forward. And so we really try very hard to make sure that we're encompassing all the all of the different aspects of the district. All of you were you applied and were selected, trying to make sure that we had that full representation, but ultimately we want you all here as a representative of the district. And we want to ensure that the decisions that you're making, the recommendations that you're putting forward really are doing so for the best interest of the students and not necessarily for your specific constituency. And so you were pulled here because you were a parent or a teacher or another piece, but want you to really start thinking about that globally and not, hey, I'm trying to, represent my school, but really trying to represent the district and what's best for all the students within the district. So the next two slides are just the list of committee members, so all of you know who it is, and as Lisa noted, this is public information. This information is posted, it's agendized, etc. So we want to make sure that the community at large also knows who's on the committee, and so that information is there for them. Over those two slides. The committee charge, really, this is the reason, or your responsibilities while you're here. We're looking at considering what's happening in each one of the schools and how that impacts, and looking at the decisions that we're trying to make with regards to potential and closures of the various schools within the district. And so, as Lisa noted, this committee is an advisory committee in its capacity. It's going to be making recommendations to the Board of Education. Ultimately, the Board of Education is who's going to make the ultimate decision. And so you are going to be looking at a lot of information and a lot of data, and they're going to take all of that into consideration. But staff will be providing them with answering any questions they have. You, at the end of this process, will be presenting, with our help, a report of this process to the board so they can see everything that you looked at, what you went through, how all of that went. But ultimately, you are recommending, and the board could decide you recommended XYZ school and then go, thanks, we appreciate that, but we're going with ABC. Not saying that that is going to happen, but the board is the ultimate body that's making that decision, and you're just making those recommendations. And so we just want to make sure that we're all on the same page and understand that. We're going to be providing you with a lot of information about the district's demographics, current and into the future. And so that's part of that charge, is really getting an understanding of what it is and what's happening with the district, not only right now, but as they see it moving forward as you're making these decisions. Because obviously the potential consolidation or closure of a school is a process that's going to affect not just the students right now, but well into moving forward. So we want to make sure that you understand what's happening in the future as well as right now. We want to look at the good things about the schools, as well as those things that may not be working so well, whether it's from the facilities to the educational components of that. So we'll be providing you with all of that information. We have some criteria that we're going to be talking about, that we're proposing, and that we're going to be looking to you to give us a thumbs up, thumbs down, make any edits that we want to, because we want to set some very objective criteria from the beginning. These are hard decisions. They can be emotional decisions. And so we want to make sure that we're trying to ground those decisions on some facts and information. That doesn't mean that the criteria comes out and it gives you a score of 100 for that school, and that means, okay, that's the top score, knocking it off, that's the one we're closing. But we want you to have that information so that as you're making those recommendations, you're doing so based on actual data, and not simply, again, that emotional tug of please don't close my kid's school, which we know is not an easy thing, or even my school, the ones of you who actually went to school here. We're going to be looking at potential, again, closures or consolidations based on the district needs when we're looking at those, the financial implications, but really the biggest piece of it is the education for the students. The ability to consolidate or close schools allows those resources to then be placed back into the district and benefit the students that are still attending, since the enrollment has been declining. And so we always want to keep that in mind. Obviously, there's a financial component, but we really ultimately, while we want to deal with those finances, we want to make sure that we're doing what's best for those kids. And so we're really going to try to provide you with as much information as you need, respond to any questions, try to get you additional information if that's what you need in order to be able to come to some solid recommendations for the school.
So this is a formal committee, and there are recommendations about how people behave in a formal committee, and this is a code of conduct that is generally accepted for formal committees. So the code of conduct does not necessarily answer every specific question, but gives you general guidelines. And committee members are expected to follow the code of conduct. Go to the next slide. This actually, I'm not going to read each of these, that you have them, but it is an expectation that you attend the committee meetings and inform staff if you cannot be here. Be prepared, stay focused, be courteous and respectful, and faithfully observe the Brown Act. And we have somebody who's going to do a presentation about the Brown Act, and so that is critical. It is important that you understand that this is a public meeting and it's being recorded. We go on, direct the questions to staff, avoid any financial conflicts of interest, and committee members will place their duty as a committee member above the personal or business expectations. As we move forward, we're actually going to be making decisions based on a consensus model. The consensus model is a general approval of the entire committee for what's best for the students in the district. So that really is, there isn't like, oh, is it by a simple majority? Is it 3/4 majority? This committee is tasked with making a consensus. It's not unanimous, but it is really, this is our general agreement on what is best for the students in the district. Most of the time, when we have to make a decision, as Brianna mentioned, we're gonna do thumbs up. We're in agreement, thumbs down, and take a poll. There's also a third option. It's, you know, in this particular case, maybe I'm neutral. Possibly I have a question. So if you choose to use the thumb in the middle, that's a sign that it's like, we need more information possibly from you about, and maybe the answer is, I'm neutral on this. So, and then all of those things are okay. The other thing that's really important as a facilitated process is you have an opportunity and an obligation to ask questions and to understand and to talk. So that really is one of the other parts of the facilitation. There'll be different opportunities for you to talk amongst yourselves in groups or to ask questions. We will have a parking lot option. So it's like, oh, I have a question. I want that to be captured. Because it's on the parking lot, it probably isn't going to be answered that evening, or the information provided that evening will be in the future. So we will use that as a facilitation process as well. Yes.
So I like to ask a lot of questions.
Okay.
And so when is it appropriate to ask questions? I have several questions already that I need answered. And so when can I?
So are
ask
the
my-
questions of what
About what has been talked about.
about what's been talked about? So-
Okay. So my first question is, for the presentation to the board, would any of us in this room be presenting to the board?
Yes, I'll get to that.
And then what is the quorum for this meeting?
There are 21 total members, so that we need 11, if I can do math right. So we need at least 11.
Okay, that'll be it for now.
Okay, thank you. That was a great way of asking questions. You modeled that perfectly. So in addition to the code, the official code of conduct, we're gonna talk about norms because most groups, it's like, okay, this is a formal meeting and we understand how to behave in a formal meeting. But locally, groups have their own norms about what is important. They have different words that they use. There's different things that just become important as how you work. So we're gonna give you an opportunity in groups of 3 with like Kathy, Anna, Catherine, you can be a group, Ross, Aaron, Christian, be a group of 3, Andrea, Melissa, and Allison, and then Janelle, Tammy, and Herman. Adrian. So the 3 of you, and so then can you, so then you guys can be a group of 3.
Skip Simona.
Yeah, skip Simona. Will you join that group? So there will be a group of 4 for you. Yeah, okay. It's like, I can't see people's names now, so all of a sudden I'm like, oh. So I want you to look at these sample group norms, respecting others' opinion, actively participate, being honest, asking clarifying questions. Are those additional norms that you think are important? And is there something that we left off? And I'll use an example of, I worked in a district where all of the central, throughway was a very, very busy freeway. And if there was an accident on the freeway where there were a lot of semis, that sometimes meetings had to be like postponed or held off because there was horrible traffic accident and it would really literally shut down the community. So if somebody like me came out and was facilitating, I wouldn't know that unless the group was like, yeah, this is really a critical thing that we need to know. If the freeway shuts down, this is how we handle that. Usually we went ahead and waited 5 minutes for the meeting, but we didn't wait 30 minutes. It's gonna be that way. So those type of things are like, what are the norms that you all use? These are not probably necessarily also the buzzwords that you guys are used to using. You facilitate these kind of meetings in your district. So are there additional norms that we need to add, or are some of those norms that we wanted? So I'm gonna give you 5 minutes with your elbow partners that we talked about to talk about, are there additional norms that you want, or we're all good? So the time starts now.
Yeah. I don't know if you were 10 minutes early in the morning. Yeah. I guess I'm maybe looking on. Which one, please? I everybody. Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask each of the groups to see if there's anything, I'm gonna ask you to share one thing that needs to be added initially, and if we need to go around again, we can do that, okay? So I am, I'm laughing to myself because the last time I did this, I told the group they had 5 minutes. And after about 3 minutes, everybody stopped talking, so I tried to bring everybody back together. They added a norm that if you say 5 minutes as a facilitator, we want our 5 minutes. So you guys got a full 5 minutes this time. We were laughing the whole time about it, so. Does the first group have a norm to add?
Yes, I guess it is a norm. So my past experience with this building is that the doors downstairs lock at 5:30. And I think that's something that people really need to be aware of. And also, is there a process for arriving late?
So we have somebody downstairs manning the door for the.
Okay. All right. So, but I'm not sure it's a norm, but it's an important piece of information that people know.
Right, okay. That's exactly what the next group. You have a norm to add, and it's okay if you don't?
We had a lot of questions.
About the norms?
No.
Okay.
5 minutes was a long time.
So at the 3 minute mark, it got quieter, and then eventually everybody started talking about something else. So, okay. The next group, do you have a norm to add? No. The next group?
Sorry. So my question is there, a possibility of flexibility? If we move through this process and something a little later comes up to be added? Or once we make a decision, the decision is made and there's no flexibility
You mean about the norms?
about the norm?
If something comes up and we need to add a norm later. So I guess that would be something we should ask as a consensus, is if a situation arises and it becomes apparent we need to add norms, is this group okay adding a norm? So let's add that as a norm. You can tell I'm not been a third grade teacher in a long time, so, yeah.
We didn't discuss this, but
Can we take it?
I just want to remind everyone, so I've gotten 2 texts from different people saying that when we speak, we have, a norm should be trying to also remember that there's Zoom people on and they can't really hear us. And the second norm should be when we're doing breakout sessions, that we mute Because somebody just complained about it.
That's.
So I'm writing the norm as speak up for the Zoom listeners.
And.
I think that, I think that, do we need to write that? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure we can mute this.
This is the attorney.
Now, so if we do that is, because that's part of public participation, so if we do that, then that might raise concerns that.
Can I add that? Can I add that to the parking lot? The access to find out about that?
Or are you saying that is the case?
I don't think we should be muting the
Okay.
public. They
So-
can mute on their side.
So we need to tell
Yeah.
participants that, yeah, if we're having any kind of small group discussion like that, then we'll have to, we can remember to let people know that we're going to do these small conversations, so they might want to mute, because it's gonna be a little disconcerting probably on their end to hear all the different conversations going on. But that's a good thing to know.
Our group of 4 over here.
Yes, because we have such a limited time together, I know in my restorative circles, we say just enough. Kind of keep it limited to how long you're speaking so that everybody has a chance to say what they want to say. And I know that, Adrian had talked about, he's been at many of the board meetings, and Adrian was saying how we can keep it to a limited time frame. So because our meetings are so short, so that everybody gets in their piece.
Is they just enough? Enough?
Everybody
Does everybody understand what that means? Okay, I like that.
You've coined a new phrase.
Exactly. And our final group.
So we wanted to put asterisks on assume positive. But it was brought to our attention that all these things are equal, so we wanted it in a circle to stay all equal. And then we wanted to have a little bit more clarification on focus on the work of the group. Having more explanation in what that means, because something to us that we feel like we need to focus on may not be something that we should focus on, but we feel like it should be. So just a little more context in relation to that. I guess that will delve down more into when we're in our process. And then she talked about, I put subject to change these norms. And then the other thing was about being able to, if we're unable to make it, are we allowed to be on Zoom to be, part of the meeting?
You can listen on Zoom, but you wouldn't be able to participate as a committee member on Zoom. So you could watch, so you know what happens at that meeting, but you wouldn't be able to, be part of the conversation and provide your input, et cetera, while on the Zoom meeting.
And so if we're on Zoom and we're on our way to the meeting and we're listening, and could we say that we were on Zoom? Would that be something we can say, hey, I was on Zoom and I was listening when I come into the space, or no?
I think that's fine. We just can't participate via your site saying when you arrived in person. Yeah, I
Okay.
think that's fine.
And so when we come into, so once someone will be tracking when we come in to log the time.
And to basically reference, hey, I heard this discussed while I was on Zoom, I'd like to circle back to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good?
Okay, we're good. Are there any other norms? So I guess, I don't want to go through and assume that we've agreed to follow these, like the honor, the start and the end times. Are we agreeing to follow all of the sample norms, adding these 4 norms to it? Is that consensus of the group? Did I see your thumb up already? Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it was up and then it's up. Okay. That's done for the moment. If, and throughout the different times, if I get the sense that the question should be put into a parking lot, I will interrupt and say, hey, does that seem like a parking lot question? And I'll start making that list too.
And Yvette, we'll try our best. Part of that focus on the work, each one of these meetings that we'll talk about it has a specific topic. And so we'll try to be focusing on that topic in that meeting, and that's the reason for that parking lot. So if you ask something that we know is coming, or that it's like, oh, we have to research, or hey, that's a little off topic, we'll get back to that, or we'll find it, we'll make that note of it. But we will do our best. That's part of our work here, is to try to keep everybody focused, and just to keep that, we want you guys to keep that in mind. When we're doing those things, that's the reason why we're doing it. Not that we're trying to keep anybody from speaking their mind or asking questions, just trying to keep everything moving orderly, but we will be sure that we're addressing all the questions that come.
Okay. Ooh, I have one more question. It has to do, so if we get an afterthought when we're done with the meeting, is there a way for us to communicate that?
So yeah, we're gonna, two things, at the beginning of every other meeting, we'll go, because we know everybody learns and listens and hears in different ways, and you might finish with the meeting and then the brilliant idea comes to you afterwards. So we will take time at the following meeting, at the very beginning, to just go, you know, now that you've digested it, is there anything you have questions about, want to talk, you know, that kind of thing, will take a few minutes. But if there's a question or something that you have in between, then always everything should be directed to staff, to Lisa or to Simona. And then they will, if it's something that we need to answer, it's something that they answer, and then we'll make sure that it gets addressed at the next meeting. And the attorney will talk about why you should never, ever, ever hit reply all. If we send anything out to all of you, we'll do our best to remember to blind CC, so that you don't accidentally, if you do hit reply all, it's not going anywhere, but if we ever do not hit reply all, always respond to the district, and they will make sure that the appropriate people get that information that we get back to you. All right, and with that, speaking of the attorney, Cynthia Smith, she is with F3. Oh, that's the one. Yeah, that's one.
Thank you. You're good. Thank you. My name is Cindy Smith, and I'm from F3 Law. I have been working with this district for 6 years or so. One of the attorneys, I'm not the only one, but one of the attorneys that's been working with the district on various things, including occasionally governance type issues. Public Records Act request is primarily what I handle for the district. So I am happy to be here today and talk to you about some of the legal bits that are applicable to you all. I need to talk louder. Really? I feel like I'm almost yelling. Okay, I will talk louder.
Yell.
Yell it. Okay, so the Brown Act, the Ralph M. Brown Act, this is one of the laws that was passed in the 1950s that really wanted to make an effort to make government open and accessible to the public. It was a reaction to the days when meetings would happen in these little rooms, and maybe members of the public would come and then they'd go away, and then they'd all go in the back room and talk about the things in secret and make decisions. That's not how government operates these days, and the Ralph M. Brown Act is one of the reasons why. It is basically the process of setting up procedural frameworks related to meetings of local agencies, officials, members of board-appointed committees, to ensure that meetings where agency business is discussed happens in a way that's open and accessible to the public. That's the main goal of the Brown Act. It applies to committees of a local agency, whether permanent or temporary, whether advisory or decision-making. So congratulations, you are all members of a legislative body subject to the Brown Act. So congratulations as the district board appointed consolidation committee. I'm gonna keep going unless somebody raises their hand for a question, okay? The Brown Act applies to meetings of a legislative body. Now, what is a meeting? A meeting is any congregation of a majority of the legislative body in the same time and location to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on any matter within the subject matter jurisdiction of the body. So some of you may be familiar with the Board of Trustees meetings of the district, right? Their body of responsibility is much broader than yours, right? It has to do with basically all the business of the school district. Your responsibility, what is the subject matter jurisdiction of this committee, is much narrower. And it primarily is covered in those 10 points that Brianna went over with you earlier in this presentation, talking about your committee charge. That is the area of expertise and business of this body. So what that means is, when we talk about public comment, is that members of the public should not be coming to you and talking to you about, I really don't like those library books that we've got going on in the high schools. That's not within your subject matter jurisdiction. Your subject matter jurisdiction are those committee charges that were listed on the slides earlier. Any congregation is a meeting. So that means if a group of you decide after this meeting that you want to go have ice cream, and you keep talking about the subject matter jurisdiction of your charge, if you keep talking about school consolidation, et cetera, that has to be done through a notice and agendized meeting. In other words, don't do that. Don't go to the ice cream parlor and have a discussion about and continue your discussion about the things that were talked about in these committee meetings. The point is that all of that business is supposed to be open and accessible to members of the public who wish to hear that discussion. What about meetings of less than the majority? I'm gonna hit on that in just a second.
That was my question.
Yeah. That is not a meeting. If you don't have a majority of your membership, it's not technically a meeting. At the same time, I don't advise that you do that. And why is that? Well, say a group of 5 of you are over here having a conversation, you start talking about committee business, and then you decide, well, you know, we really need to get Yvette Minor on this because she knows about it. And before you know it, you've got this chain of communication that is then violative of the Brown Act. It's much, much safer and recommended that you don't have those discussions outside of this committee. If you have a question, or you feel like you need more information that you may not have been provided, Lisa and Simone are your contacts for that. And again, there's already a process that we've talked about by which that question or comment can be then tacked on to the beginning of your next meeting. Does that make sense? Okay. Let me see. So again, business of this committee needs to be open and with public input. I will mention that the Brown Act does allow for the discussions of some topics outside of the public eye. If you've ever participated in any of the district board meetings, you know that there are topics that they go into what's called closed session to cover. Just generally, I'm not going to go into all the details on this. Those subjects can be, for example, personnel related matters, litigation matters, student matters. There's rationales for why those things are able to be discussed in private as opposed to open into the public. And a lot of them have to do with confidentiality issues, strategic negotiation statuses, things like that, that for the time being should not be made public. So I'm not going to get into all that because it likely doesn't apply to your committee. You're likely not going to have any, can't think of a closed session item that you might end up coming across. Okay. Slide. So the Brown Act requires your meetings to be noticed. In other words, the public must be able to know when and where your meetings are. So it's very important that, and that has to occur 72 hours before a meeting. So you have staff folks that are taking care of those actual duties of putting together the meeting notice and making sure that it's posted in the public places it's required to be posted. But I will point out that if we decide that meetings are going to start at 5:30 in this room, in this building, that's when that meeting has to occur. We can't decide, you know what, we're going to start at 5 and we're going to start at the building down the street. We can't make that decision because then the public hasn't been provided adequate notice where that meeting is. There also has to be an agenda of what you're going to discuss. And that agenda covers not just for the, our big board with the district, items that are discussed or acted upon. For you, there's not going to be action items, but those items that you're going to be discussing, those do need to be indicated in the notice with an adequate description so that the members of the public are able to understand what you're going to be talking about at that meeting. And in light of the discussion that was talked about with regard to norms, my suggestion would be is if there's going to be the possibility that norms are gonna be discussed at each meeting, we would want to include that on the agenda, because the other thing is, if something isn't on your agenda, you can't talk about it. If you've got 6 items on your agenda and somebody comes to the meeting and says, well, I want to talk about X, and it's not noticed on the agenda, you can't talk about it because the public doesn't know and hasn't been informed that that item is going to be discussed at that meeting. So it could be placed on a subsequent meeting agenda, but it cannot be discussed at that meeting. So again, we just want to make sure that our members of the public are aware of the items that are going to be discussed on agendas so that they know, hey, I'm interested in that. I want to go listen to it, or I might want to get some comment about it. Speaking of comment, the Brown Act also requires members of the public to be able to provide public comment on any item on your agenda prior to or during the discussion of those items. And it also requires members of the public to have the opportunity to give public comment on anything else within the general jurisdiction of your charge. So say you have 6 items on your agenda, member of the public wants to come and speak about item 2, then they have the ability to do that. They have the ability to put in a speaker card and provide that comment prior to or during that item being discussed by you all. They also have the opportunity to raise item 7 that, while within the subject matter jurisdiction of your charge, not on the agenda, they have the ability to raise that and to make a public comment as well. Any questions about that? Oh.
Yeah, who sets the agenda? And how do we, as committee members, get things onto the agenda?
So we are setting the agenda, working with the district about what's going to be presented at that given meeting, depending on the meeting topics. And so if there's something that you think you'd like to have on the agenda or have for this conversation, then we'll have that conversation as a committee. The committee backs the consensus model, says, yep, we want to add that, and we will put that on the agenda for the next meeting then.
Yes.
If someone from the public comments on something not on the agenda, are we not allowed to discuss it? Do we wait until the next meeting?
Good question. So here's what the Brown Act says about that. Members of the board are very limited in their response to statements or questions by persons commenting on items not on the agenda. Committee members or staff may ask clarifying questions, make a brief announcement, make a brief report on his or her own activities, refer a matter to staff or other resources for information, request that staff report back on the matter at a subsequent meeting, or direct staff to place the matter on the future agenda. So all those are the things that can be done, which is basically, we can table it for the next meeting. We can maybe ask a clarifying question of staff, but we just have to be really careful about it because that item that the public brought up is not agendized. So what we can't do is get into a big old discussion about that issue that was brought up by the public because it wasn't noticed. Yes.
Can you remind us, please, if people are participating via Zoom, are they able to make public comment or is there an email address where they can send them beforehand?
No, the only option, like our regular board meetings with the board as the district's board, public comment is through participation at the meeting itself. Yeah.
Question.
Yes.
So, because we talked about our norms, is that something that's gonna be, can we put that on the agenda as a standing item? So, continue.
Is there another question?
Hi, you had mentioned that the public could send in comments.
No.
Misunderstood that. Thank you.
No, that's not a method that we have.
I just wondered because if they public was going to send comments, would that be sure?
I don't think that's not going to be opened up as a way for public to provide comment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, prohibition on serial communications. This is something that I hinted at already and was sort of related to the question about less than a majority talks about something. Our main fear here is that you would get yourself into this serial communication issue, which is prohibited by the Brown Act. What is a serial communication? Well, there's two different ways. One is a vet calls up Andrea and talks to her about an issue. And then she calls up Ben, and then she calls up, you know, on down the line, the folks, I'm sorry, I can't read that far. So next thing we know, we have more than a majority that have talked about this issue, whether it's through telephone, email, text messages, any kind of communication. Again, if you're talking about things out of the context of a meeting that's been noticed and agendized and members of the public can come, it's a Brown Act issue. So that can't happen. The other way a serial communication can happen is if Yvette decides to talk to Andrea, Andrea talks to this person, and that person, and that person, or, I'm sorry, I can't remember which one I talked about. There's the hub and spoke, and then there's the daisy chain. So it's the, you know, on down the line, and then there's the one person that talks to all the people, all around them. Either way, don't do that. Don't have those communications. Because those would be violative of the Brown Act. So any questions about that? About those serial communications? Okay. I'm going to talk about one of the reasons why we don't want you to do that, and that is because of the California Public Records Act. The California Public Records Act is another set of laws that was implemented in the 50s to again open the business of local agencies, state agencies to the public. And what the Public Records Act says is most of the time, there are exemptions, records regarding district business are able to be accessed by members of the public. And this district gets a lot of Public Records Act requests. Records of this committee are subject to production in response to a Records Act request. So that would mean any of the records that have been provided to you for this meeting, those are able to be accessed through Public Records Act request. Anything that you decide to bring to a meeting and share with the group, not that that's a bad thing, that may be very appropriate for you to bring records and share with the committee. I would just caution you that if what you're sharing is confidential in some way, if it includes student information, we may want to take a look at that first, because student information is information that is exempt from production in response to a PRA. So if you have something that you want to share with the committee and you think it has confidential information, please reach out to Lisa about that first before sharing it. And also, please don't share it with the whole committee. Let Lisa do that through the meeting organization process. Records that also might be subject to a Public Records Act request are all the emails that go around to you, from you. So again, please don't reply all. Couple reasons why those records would be subject to the PRA may or may not be a problem, but if it shows a possible Brown Act violation, then that would be something that would be problematic potentially. Text messages are also subject to production in response to a PRA request. Even if those text messages are on your personal phones, even if the emails are sent to your personal account. There's a case that came out in 2017, I think, caused a big ruckus. And it basically said it doesn't matter where public records are housed. They could be housed on a public device. They could be housed on a public account. And if those records have to do with district business, they are responsive and they have to be retrieved and reviewed and possibly produced. So please be mindful of that as you are going through meetings. Just see what else. Any questions about the Public Records Act?
So, yeah, I have a quick one. So I have to do with that last statement when you mentioned when the email goes out. So let's say an email goes out, but we do not respond. There's still a possibility somebody call for public records that can still, they could still come and check our phones if there is a possible incident, even if we haven't responded.
Correct. There may be a request, and by the way, if there is a request and there's email records produced, and I'm assuming for many of you, you may have private email accounts that are being used. We would redact that information. That would be considered private information that we wouldn't make public. It depends on the request, I think, to get to your actual question as to whether we would want to ask you if you have any other records on your personal accounts or devices. It would depend on what the request is, the scope of the request. And we would want to just be thorough in making sure that we have captured any public records that might be out there. So how likely is this? I don't know. We have had requests for records of other committees in the past, so I did want to definitely bring it to your attention.
Even just follow up, even if we don't respond, that could still happen?
We would maybe just want to ask the question of you.
I won't respond to any email.
You can ask questions too, like, hey, where's the meeting next week? I need to know because I'm trying to plan my day or whatever. You can send that communication to Simona, so she can answer. So that's fine. And that doesn't raise a Brown Act concern. It's really what we're concerned about with Brown Act stuff is that you're not discussing the business of the committee outside of these public meetings. And then the last bit I want to cover is this conflict of interest piece that was hinted at a little bit by the ladies earlier. So as a member of this committee, your work needs to be unbiased and subjective, right? So in other words, your input, your contribution should not be driven by, you know, any interest you may have. Maybe that you're employed at a particular school. Maybe you own a house near a particular school. Maybe some other, you know, whatever that interest is, your employment status, it shouldn't be what is driving your work here. The work here should be driven by the interests of the district and the committee and, you know, making decisions based on the global good as opposed to, well, if this school gets closed, then I might have a financial impact from that based on something, right? That should not be driving what our decisions are being made by. And if that is an issue, if there is a financial interest, a direct financial interest in particular that you feel is impacting your ability to be objective about a particular decision, please reach out to Lisa about that. And if it really is an issue, you may have to not make that decision for that particular school, right? Does that make sense? Any questions about that?
Would that mean that they're just like not voting? Are we voting on anything? How does that become a conflict of interest?
Well, you're not voting. It's again, this collective thumbs up, thumbs down kind of thing, consensus decision. But, and again, I think the fact that you are an advisory committee, the risk of an issue here is probably low. But at the same time, maybe for you, it's this on a particular thing that in your mind, I might have a direct financial interest in that, right? Does that make sense? Yes.
Just looking at the language, avoid appearance of impropriety, are you advising us to abstain or to stay neutral? Even if in our mind we're feeling we can be objective, but if someone could construe there was a conflict of interest, you would like us to be neutral?
And that's the key. What you just said is that interest may be there, but in your mind, that's not what's driving my decision here. My decision is being driven by the information that's been presented by the district, the financials, the whatever, all of the records that have been presented. If you can make that decision without the other thing impacting you, then you can make that decision. If you can't, then I think, you know, abstention or not being, you know, going either way makes sense. Is that fair? Anything I missed? A question? Yes.
I'm not saying I'm planning to do this, but Now that you've put the fear in us, what happens if we do violate the Brown Act?
There is a process in which somebody can raise the issue, right? Like it's interesting here because decisions aren't being made. So in like the Brown Act world with the board, if they make a decision and it's alleged that a Brown Act violation occurred, there's this what's called the cure and correct process, whereby the board can basically retake the action to take away this taint of a possible Brown Act violation. So for you all, I mean, it has to be something that happens and becomes known, and then it could be an issue that could lead to a misdemeanor, but it would have to be reported to the public, the DA, thank you, District Attorney's Office. There would have to be a process. The best course of action is to just not. Yes.
Well, that triggers a question for me is maybe part of the norms, if someone violates that, is there something that can be said about removing somebody from the committee and having like an alternative?
Has that been discussed in any of the committee? How has that been dealt with other committees?
I've not had that come up with committees and, the discussion being, that we did have a number against 114 applicants. But we had some alternate names available before making our final recommendation, but because work is so dependent on having a consistent group, we did not opt to have alternates going forward.
And given we're a group of 21, not that any of you are going to do it. If we lost one or two of you.
I think that's probably good, I agree. Anything else before I sit down? Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Yes.
So, group participation time. Yvette, you asked a question earlier about whether you as a committee were going to be involved with the board. And really ultimately, while we are here to facilitate and staff is here to address and answer questions, this really is and respects your committee. And so we do feel that it's important that you have a chair and a vice chair that really is running the meetings. We will be, as I said, providing agendas. We're putting together, as we're going through this process, a report that we're going to share with you for you guys to read it. That's going to document all of this and your recommendations at the end that will be provided to the board. The notion is that the chair and vice chair would actually be the persons and anybody else who's interested in doing so as well, presenting that report and these processes to the board. It's not going to be me and Lynette standing in front of the board saying, this is what the committee did. It's you as a committee through the chair and the vice chair that would be doing that. At the meetings moving forward, it would be the chair and in their absence, the vice chair who would bring the meeting to order, agenda item A, please take roll, staff, can you make the presentation now, etc., going through that process so that it really is your committee, and we are just here to help to make sure that you're getting the information that you need, and ensuring that we stay on focus and answer those questions as we need to, so that you have the data that you're looking for. Does that make sense to everyone? And so with that, I'm looking for either a volunteer or nominations. We're going to take them one at a time for a chairperson for the committee. And don't all speak at once because it's bad for that.
I volunteer for the chair right there. Unless someone else really wants to jump in.
All right, we have been. Anyone else? They're like, no.
I think for me, I can do either.
Not volunteering or volunteering. So will the chairperson and vice chair, are they going to be participating in the development of agendas, or are they just chair and vice chair for the purposes of running the meeting?
They're chair and vice chair for purposes of the meeting.
All in favor?
Any others? So we have a chair and the vice chair. Do you guys want to flip a coin as to which one of you wants one or the other?
Yeah.
Rock, paper, scissors. Yeah.
You leave a point, I guess.
Anybody have one?
Flip a coin. Paper, scissors. I think I'll find another way.
Yeah.
Anybody have a
Anybody
coin?
As a facilitator, I didn't know I needed a point. It's like, oh, quarter. I'll give it back. And I'm not good, I don't know how to do that, so it's going on the ground. All right. Wants to be somebody.
Tails.
There you go.
All right, so tails,
Jen.
Ben will be chair. Tails, Ben will be chair, heads, Christian will be chair. All right. Heads. Oh. Thank you very much, both of you. We will keep forward for this meeting, next one, all you. Thank you. All right. So what we want to do is just go through a quick overview of the sites. This is some broad information, more so that if there's anyone of you here that, hey, I know where my kid goes to school, but I have no idea what other schools there are within the district. And then also for the public and everybody who's watching, we really just want to set the stage of what school sites we're talking about throughout this process. We are going to go into a lot more detail on each one of these school sites and each one of these metrics over our meetings together. But we just wanted you to kind of have the big picture of what it is that you're going to be discussing over the next 7 to 8 meetings, or if you don't count between 6 or 7, all right? So each one of these slides has some enrollment data. The data is based on a system that the district uses called Aries. And it's their data management system, and so it includes the enrollment information for the district. Is it as of census day? Yeah.
It is the 23-24 school year.
Okay, 23.
So yes, census day.
Okay, so census day in California, each first Wednesday of October, the state takes, has all the districts take enrollment, just a snapshot on one day of the year. And that's what's submitted to the states for enrollment purposes and information. So that's what that date is. So it could be completely different, by the next day. And so this is just always with all these numbers, there's always a point in time and, 2 days later, it's a different number. So we just want to keep that in mind. Total number of classrooms and the portables were based on the district's facilities master plan. Again, that was a point in time, but we have that information. You'll see that there are a number of students, and that is based on, as we're talking about this, basically a capacity. And so what they do is there are 10 classrooms. 4 of them are TK. So for those TK classrooms, times 24 kids, that's how many students can fit in those classrooms. You add the number of students that are 3 through 6, those classrooms, and that's how you get the capacity of the school site. So when you see those numbers that say, there's 30,000 kids on that school site. It's number of classrooms times capacity or times the capacity per classroom. And that's how you come up with that number. As you can see, depending on the grades, there's different capacity. Special education students, there's a different capacity. And so all of that is taken into consideration when the district is looking and developing. Okay. Yes.
When you're looking from site to site, were you looking at, I understand for this 24 kids for TK to 2, are you looking at the subset of numbers in determining one site has, based upon the special ed population, has 8 classrooms and one site has 14 classrooms? Or are you making sets of assumptions, just based sets of assumptions that every school has 6 special ed classrooms, for example?
So these were the numbers used in the facilities master plan when they were looking at the demographics. So looking at a capacity of, okay, here's roughly what we look at. So it's per site kind of average.
So it's not actual, it's average.
It may vary year to year based on the type of special needs classes. that are
Okay.
there.
And you also have to keep in mind that the capacity, if a school site has 20 classrooms, you can physically fit 30 kids in each of those classrooms. That school site has a capacity of 600 kids. If the district decides that they're going to use 10 of those classrooms for special education, they might have the enrollment might be lower. And we have to take that into consideration. But the capacity of that school site is based on the number of kids that you actually fit on.
Got it. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. So, I know this is just a snapshot, just like an initial look, but so much has changed since last fall at a lot of the schools. And also the other category, I have noticed, and a few of them doesn't capture programs. So do you want us to comment on that tonight, or is there going to be a future time when we have more detail and that?
Correct.
We should
So
talk about
at future meetings, the first meeting is gonna be on demographics and capacity, so we'll go into a lot of detail, and then if there's questions or wait, did you miss this, or what about that, we can address it. We're gonna do a whole meeting on educational and support services, so we'll capture all those other programs. So this is again, just that big picture of these things, but we're gonna go into detail on each one of those throughout these meetings, and you'll have the opportunity then if something got.
Okay.
Yes.
On here, we're speaking about the capacity per classroom. Is this going to be tied up to the class size? Which I know there has been negotiations with the teachers about the class sizes. Are we tying that together at some point or not? Is that going to be part of the criteria we're discussing?
We're really looking at what can fit on a campus, because as we're talking about right now, there's this potential of school closure. So if the district, again, making up a number, has enough capacity to fit 50,000 students, but there's only 25,000 students enrolled, then we know that there's a lot of available capacity. And we're looking at then, hey, we could close, again, exaggerating, half the schools because we have half the kids. The class sizes, the district could decide tomorrow that they're gonna have class sizes of 30-1 or 12-1. That can change from year to year. We're really looking at those physical spaces. And then part of that is then how does the district program those spaces? So the class sizes as far as student to teacher ratios, that we're really putting on the side, because that's a programming issue that the district can determine. We want to focus on the capacity as far as what can physically fit on a school site campus. Right? Adrian.
Tengo una pregunta.
I have a question.
Las modificaciones que se están haciendo en las escuelas para consolidar algunas, solamente abarca el distrito de Santa Rosa o en un futuro planean con los distritos de alrededor a unirlos también.
So he's asking if you guys, if this is currently just to consolidate our San Juan City district schools, or do you guys plan on consolidating some of the other districts like to unite as one?
This is just about Santa Rosa City Schools. This district has no control or say into what other districts in the area do. I can tell you.
Context maybe. So the district, with the help of the county office, did look at a district consolidation study. That's separate from this committee altogether. And what one has, there's no correlation between the two.
Yes.
So in relation to that district consolidation, that is something that could possibly happen if that process moves forward with the district consolidation.
That would be completely separate.
Well,
from
I
this.
understand that, but that's something that could possibly still happen. So it's not appropriate probably for us to talk about that here, we can't. Okay.
Brown Act.
Okay, and so then my other question has to do with the portables, which I don't know where this is gonna go, because we have our bond measures where we're supposed to be taking out these porta potty, the portable. Yeah, so how are we gonna take that into consideration when we're supposed to be doing this plan here, when those are supposed to be off the campuses because they're horrible. So how are we gonna do this work, knowing that those portables need to be taken out, and then these numbers and stuff are gonna shift?
So the capacity information that we're gonna show you is gonna be based on with the portables and without, so that you know what both of those numbers look like and what could the school site fit if all of them were gone, and what it looks like with them all. Yes,
I just want to remove one option off the table off the bat. I just want to confirm the option to not close any school sites is not an option.
that is not an option. Yeah, you are here to make a recommendation to the board on the closure of school sites.
Okay.
And we'll get into numbers and all of that stuff, but yes, that's what we're doing.
I may be getting ahead of your plan, but is, the recommendation of building more permanent to replace portables could be part of our recommendation?
Well, that wouldn't be a recommendation with regards to closure. That's something that the districts, that'll be talking about, as Yvette noted, you're pulling off portables. If it's, oh, it's perfect, all of these kids, are going to this one school site, they fit, it's, geographically great. We really need to replace those portables. That's a note that we can put in the report to the board. But yeah, that'll be that piece.
So, and some of that work has been done as part of the facilities master plan, looking at which sites could accommodate more permanent buildings in place of portables.
Okay, so I was piggybacking probably on that, and probably Lisa, you're the person to answer this question. So we just had passed a big bond, there's all this bond money. There was a lot of grand plans, obviously the master plan kept that in mind. They also did come through and let us know we're specifically planning things with constraints of this is your 20 or 30-year projection of what your site could hold, or what you're expected to probably receive. And so I guess my question was, okay, so will our decisions also hinge slightly on, okay, I'm just using Montgomery as an example, they just broke ground, they're gonna build this huge building, make all those portables go away, and that's in the works. So, are things like that, would something be put on pause and building would not be created, or because there's a building being put there, are we talking about you could end up abandoning a site that just got a brand new building put in?
That's part of the conversation,
Okay.
it'll be part of the criteria.
Are we going to be speaking about or making any recommendation for what to do with the closed school site?
So that's technically another committee that would be formed by the district. It's called a 7-Eleven committee to surplus the property.
Okay.
Again, as a committee, if you had there was a consensus, this would be a great place for a new stadium.
Alternative.
We can note that in there, but ultimately that decision is another committee. Kind of like this, they would sit down and look at surplus property, determine whether it is, and what the district might be able to do with it.
Okay.
Hold on, there was a hand over here.
Yeah, good question, maybe a little bit following on that. Maybe two-part question. First of all, should we look at this in silos? So just the elementary campuses, just the middle school campus, just the high school campuses? Or if the recommendation is we're gonna close a middle school campus or some other campus, are we considering the shuffling of other school campuses to try and consolidate folks onto it? Or is that separate committee that's looking at?
No,
now
that
that we're
might-
closed, or
Yeah, that could be part of your consideration, depending on what campuses are closed and where. This committee would not be deciding, okay, yeah, we're definitely moving that school there, this one's going here, we're turning that into a 6 through 12 at that level, no. But if part of the recommendation is, it makes sense that if we close these three, that you combine those two or whatever that is, that could be part of that conversation.
So are they looking to close some of the schools because resources, or because it's actually not kids being enrolled, like someone here, because they don't have enough kids in the district?
Yeah.
Why actually is the reason?
Yeah.
The reason?
I can let Lisa address some of that, but my understanding, it's a combination. There's declining enrollment. The district has less students now than it did. And if you have a district complete, the district that was built and has enough seats for 18,000 kids and is now 9,000 kids, they are then, paying for resources for these campuses, and those resources could be better going to those 9,000 kids that are still here. So it's a little bit about resource allocation, and also then the fiscal impacts of that. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, no, that is basically it, that it's, prioritizing how we best can serve the students now and into the future. We have, it's unsustainable for our budget to continue operating at the level that we are when we don't have the students here to occupy the classes. We have to staff differently with having more spots. We have more facility costs, overhead, everything is substantially larger.
Sorry, we had one more and then we have two more things we have to get through in half an hour to do it, so. Yep.
Are there any schools that are off the table for discussion, and if so, will you let us know what they are before we?
Yeah, my understanding is there's no schools off the table.
We came in presenting all of the information to the committee to have a full discussion, thinking about current construction going on, all of these different pieces that will come to the committee for discussion.
All right, so we're just gonna go through these so that you can see what they are. We have them broken down by school type. So elementary school, there are 9 of them throughout the district. First one, Abraham Lincoln Elementary School, TK through 6, transitional kindergarten through 6th grade. The enrollment for 23-24, and someone mentioned that things have changed since then. We really like to look at state certified data, because again, from one day to the next, things will change. And we just, this 24-25 school year is just kicking in underway. So what you're gonna be looking at mostly is when we're looking at data is gonna be 23-24, because that is the most recent certified data. And then we're also gonna be looking at projections moving forward, because obviously you don't wanna make decisions based off of last year's information. We wanna know, hey, we're considering doing this for, 25, 26 or 26, 27, that's really the information we want to think about.
Just really quickly, is that number for enrollment based on that Wednesday in October attendance?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Student capacity, so this, yes.
I have a request to our chairs and the consultants, about like, if we're looking at forecasting, providing trends to the committee so they have a better idea at the next meeting based like the enrollment trends and.
Yes, that'll be part of that next meeting.
Will this data be pulled from what the demographic?
The future, the projected.
No, but are you gonna use what they did last year in the master plan, or are you gonna have a revamp on it?
That we have at least that, and there will be some information that will need to be updated because we're trending lower.
So the capacity on this campus, again, there's 19 physical classrooms or permanent classrooms. There's 8 portable classrooms. Total capacity is 428. That's how many students can fit on this campus. And then for the other, at this point, they're showing none. Albert F. VA, elementary school, again, TK, transitional kindergarten through 6. Total enrollment last year, 260. That has a capacity of 524. And so you can start to see the size of the campus and the number of kids that are currently on the campus right now. And so you can start to get that notion of, you see that the enrollment has been declining and that the district has extra capacity because of that decline in enrollment.
Is there a target capacity that we would be ideally going for, or occupancy that we would be going for, enrollment to capacity?
So we'll leave that for the next meeting when we get into the detail about the capacity and the demographics.
Can you just quickly say more about what will fall under other, and then we'll get more detail, but would that be like if there's special day classes, if there's particular programs?
Here, we were just trying to get a sense of, is there something else on the campus that isn't typical? So I would say, special education classes, those are all over the district.
Yeah.
If you have, I'm completely making it up, YMCA that's sharing space on the campus, that would be something that's interesting to know. If you have some special black box theater, we're just trying to figure out a wellness center. We're trying to figure out what are other things that really are kind of typical. Okay, you're educating, you have classrooms for these students and their multi-purpose room and, their library and that.
And just to clarify, so when we are getting more detailed information, it would specifically differentiate special education and how many kids are served.
Correct. Yes, yeah, because you don't want to disadvantage a school site that says, oh, they're under capacity, but that's because, again, making it up, that's all special education kids. You know, that makes a difference. So we will note all of those things.
So this is a far question, but in the event that, let's say, a total section of schools are wiped out, there's the potential for us to lose a board of trustees based on like with the restructuring that we're doing, that could happen.
That is not under the purview here, and that is, yeah.
That's a good question.
Trustee, the number of schools in that. And it's unlikely that you're gonna close a sufficient number of schools where the boundaries are gonna switch such that you are gonna go down, board member.
It's Andrea's question, that was great, that the idea is not all schools have the same amount of busing. That would be a good thing for none.
Yeah.
And one of our elementaries does no busing, they
We'll
all
be
walk to
looking
school.
into all of that.
It's a huge.
One more question, and then I'm gonna, remember, we're getting into specifics. This is just a general overview for this evening.
Okay, so, on classrooms, I'm going back to when I worked at Lincoln. There, in each of the quads, there's also a center room, and is that center room being counted as a classroom? Okay, thank you.
Brook Hill, again, TK through 6, enrollment 275, capacity is 514. Helen Lehman Elementary School, again, also transitional kindergarten through 6, enrollment was 341 students, has a capacity for 532 students. Hidden Valley Elementary School, every time I hear that, I think Hidden Valley Ranch.
Yeah.
And start thinking about trusting. This is preschool, pre-kindergarten, through 6th grade, 480 students last year, has a capacity of 632, and this one, as you can see, has a deaf and hard of hearing program on that campus. James Monroe Elementary School, TK through 6, past enrollment of 311, a capacity of 632. The North Bay Children's Center program is on that campus.
Really quick for that, so is that children's center considered one of the classrooms, or is that just a totally different capacity?
We'll go into detail about that when we talk about Luther Burbank Elementary School, TK through 6. Last year's enrollment was 296 students, capacity is 480. Proctor Terrace Elementary School, again, TK through 6. Past enrollment, last year's enrollment was 287 students, capacity is 424. Steel Lane Elementary, pre-K through 6. Last year's enrollment was 423, capacity is 514. And again, the North Bay Children's Center is on that campus. So that's all of the elementary schools. 4 middle schools in the district that we're looking at. Herbert Slater Middle School, that's 7 through 8. Enrollment last year was 519 and capacity is 1,041. Hilliard Comstock, 7 through 8. Capacity last year was 932, excuse me. Enrollment last year was 392. I messed up the date and the numbers. And the capacity is 963. Rincon Valley Middle School, again, 7 through 8, has enrollment last year was 683, has capacity for 1,005 students. And the Santa Rosa Accelerated Charter School is also co-located on that campus, and there's also a slide for them separately, just so that you know where it is. Santa Rosa Middle School, 461 students last year, capacity is 1,012. Moving to the high schools, there's 6 high schools in the district. And there are 9 through 12 schools, all of them. Capacity, or excuse me, enrollment last year was 1,026. And they have a capacity of 2,097. The Santa Rosa Community Health Clinic and Agricultural Program is also on that campus. Maria Carrillo High School, Enrollment last year was 1,584. The student capacity is 1,800. Montgomery High School, enrollment last year was 1,298. And student capacity is 2,145. Pioneer High School, enrollment last year was 1,437. Total capacity is 1,887. And it has the Spark Center on that campus. Ridgeway High School, 139 students. This is a continuation school. So hence the much smaller number as compared to the comprehensive high schools. Student capacity, 380. Santa Rosa High School, enrollment last year was 1,595. Total capacity is 2,232. It has the agricultural program, the Alba Lane location and ArtQuest on that campus. We're gonna also look at the charter schools. So there are 4 of them throughout the districts. The Cesar Chavez Language Academy enrollment in 23-24 was 784, has a capacity of 1,199 students, and it has a Head Start program on that campus. SR Accelerated Charter School, capacity or enrollment last year was 128 students. It actually has a capacity of 108. So is that a typo? Is it over capacity? I think it's a typo. We will look at that and make sure to fix all the numbers. So, I mean, there are, and it's located on the same campus as the Pingon Valley Middle School. The Santa Rosa Charter for the Arts School had an enrollment last year of 397, and it has a student capacity of 504 students. And then the Santa Rosa French American Charter School had an enrollment of 490. Its capacity, again.
So part of the program is actually on Herbert Slater Middle School.
There we go. So that one's actually. So the campus has a capacity of 464, but some of the students are at another schools.
Do you have a breakdown of?
We'll break that down. Yeah. Yes.
I just, my understanding is that Ridgeway High School changes enrollment drastically throughout the year, just a side note, because it is a school that students move into when they need extra support.
Yes. And so there are a couple of other sites that the district has that we wanted to provide to you. Lewis Early Learning Academy or another site. This is actually an infant through pre-K program. The enrollment last year was 123. This is one that the capacity varies because of the special education enrollment that happens at each program. And so this one is much harder to pin down with regards to the capacities. We wanted to provide you with that information. Yeah.
My understanding in the reconfiguration of the property at 211 Ridgeway, that program is going to be moved over, which means that campus would no longer have students at it. Is that correct?
Potentially, yes. So also, with Lewis, they are at Lewis Early Learning Academy at that site. There's also part of the program because they're limited in space and we can't use the main building for students. They're all in portables there, co-located with partner organizations. Also Steel Lane Elementary houses some of their programs there as well. So from Lewis on the Steel Lane. The redesign of the district office does include, it's the district office, the warehouse, the 18 to 22 program, and early childhood education is the plan for that. Be able to consult on that.
Thank you.
And that's about 3 years.
And then for Lewis, we just provided some additional information with regards to the programs that are there and the number of classrooms they're using. A little birdie said that the classrooms, who's using what, might be slightly different, but again, we'll go into all of that detail when we're looking at all this information over the next several months. And so we'll be able to break that down for you so you can see what's where, how much is actually being used.
Yes. Are we looking of a number of schools that we need to close, or the district needs to close?
We'll talk about that when we start looking at all of that information and see if there's Because the district will be showing their financial information, we'll be looking at total capacity, all of those things. All right. So again, really big, broad overview. We're gonna go into a lot more detail about each one of those sites, at each one of the specific topic meetings that we're gonna be having over the next several months, okay? So what we want to talk about is the proposed criteria that we will be utilizing or propose to utilize throughout this process. The criteria is broken up into 4 categories, and we're going to go through those, and that is going to hand you
now.
Yeah. Okay. So. Lynette, hold on. We're gonna go on that. Okay. Yeah. So. Each one of we tried to group the criteria based on some topical areas. The California Department of Education has some recommendations with regards to the types of things that committees should be looking at and the information is being provided. And so the use of the criteria, the development of criteria is to try to address those areas. So these are criteria that we have used looking at the California Department of Education's information and trying to model that. But again, every community is different. So there might be something here that you go, wait a second, we really need to add a criteria for this because this is something specific to Santa Rosa. And so we want to take those in consideration and add them as long as it's something that the committee as consensus says, yeah, no, this is something we want to look at. The way that the criteria is set up, there's a scoring methodology with it. There are 2 scores. There's just the regular score, which is for the most part, a yes or no question. And you're getting a score of 1 or 2, depending on where that is. And then there's a weighted criteria. So as you can imagine, with the score of generally 1 or 2 and the occasional 3, you can end up with schools that have the same exact score. And so the weighted criteria is to provide a little bit more nuance and to get that number. Again, this is going to end up with the score that's going to say the school with the highest score is the one that's, for the various criteria that we're looking at, that would be higher on that list of choice. That does not mean that we are going to do this, fill out this criteria and go, that school got the highest score, that's the one we're closing, end of discussion. That was easy. Maybe the committee looks at those and goes, yep, nope, that makes sense. But that's part of the conversation. We want you to have something objective and to have facts to back that up. And so we want to provide that information and follow this criteria. But that is not the sole determining factor. Okay. As we look at this criteria, we're developing it now and making sure we have agreement now, because as people start, some of you probably know the numbers in your head for some of these anyway. But as we start to fill in the data, then you start to see where things are leaning, and then that gets much more emotional. It's like, oh, it looks like my school has the highest score. I don't want that to close. Well, let's change the criteria, or let's do something different. So we're gonna decide it up front when we don't know anything, that these are the things that are important to us that we wanna look at. And then let the chips fall where they may, so to speak, as far as the scoring is concerned. And then at the end of this, we will be having that conversation about, all right, here is what the scoring is telling you. Are there other things that we need to think about? Is there something that we missed? And does somebody really want to advocate for why X school shouldn't be closed or why Y school should be closed? We'll have those conversations, but we need to start somewhere that's an objective basis for all of it, right? So the first grouping and consequently the first meeting that we're going to be having after this one is about demographics and capacity. So the first one is school enrollment is low and projected to remain low. And what we're determining low is enrollment below 70% of capacity, including considering special day classes. Again, you don't want to disadvantage a school site because it has more special education classrooms than another school site. So we're going to take that into consideration when we're looking at those numbers, and not simply saying, oh, that one has less kids altogether. Well, that can change if the district decides to move special education somewhere else. And so we want to take that into consideration when we're looking at those enrollment and those numbers. I think you had your hand up first and then.
As a part of our facilities master plan, there is a plan on removing portables from many of our sites and not rebuilding or putting in new ones. Will that be taken into consideration when you're considering numbers?
Yes, we'll be looking, the sheet that we'll be showing you that's tracking all of this information will show what it is with the portables and what the capacity is without the portables.
And are they have special education programs in all of the schools or just some of the schools?
We'll be looking at that as we go through the data.
And quick question, because I think it was this charter where they have their students on two different sites. And so we'll be looking at like that particular school and, what would that look like if we got a bigger school and close the school that they're in and that kind of thing? That's something
That would be part of the conversation. So the second criteria, demographically diverse population based on the unduplicated pupil percentage. Obviously, it's difficult, you know, what's your definition of diverse? If I asked each one of you would come up with a different answer. And so we had to pick something that we could base it on. And so what we're using is the unduplicated pupil percentage. This was a percentage that was developed by the state that is counting the percentage of students that are eligible for free and reduced price meals, are English learners, or are foster youth. A student can be all three of those things, but it's in a duplicated count because that student for this purposes only counts once. You don't count them 3 times in this number. And so the notion here is we're looking for a range within 40 to 60%. Again, there's no magic numbers, there's no magic bullets. Somebody could say, oh no, it's diverse to me if it's 70%. Somebody might think it's diverse at 10. And so we were finding that middle range of where that was, and we're looking for that range of 40 to 60% with regards to that as a proxy for diversity. Okay. 3, excess classroom capacity, excluding portable. So there's, you know, X number of kids on the campus, there's this much capacity, how much is left over? You don't want to count the portables because they can be taken out. Some of them are going to be taken out. They're not going to last forever. So that's part of what we're looking at. 4, enrollment includes positive intra-district or intra-district transfer. And so there are students that are moving within the district. Their homeschool is one, but they might be attending another school for various reasons. And there's kids coming from outside the district into the district and kids that are here that are going somewhere else. And so we want to take into account those school sites that have higher capacity or have higher enrollment because they're actually drawing students. And
So we'll get that, okay, data, and maybe we get to see like how many of our school, and we've been struggling for like 15, 20 years about people not going to the school that's in their attendance footprint. And it makes it confusing about who really, some schools would be packed with kids if their kids actually went to their schools. And so I feel bad when we're talking about closing schools and to look at where those neighborhoods really go.
Yeah.
And then the flip side of the coin is the business model, what's attracting students to keep kids in our district.
that part of it, we won't be looking, well, yeah, I mean, and we won't be looking at, oh, well, what is it that's happening? What's that one? I mean, there'll be some conversation about it, but really that's the, or somebody else called it the secret sauce. I said it.
Is there a committee for that?
The secret sauce.
Be there in that one.
So number 5, excess classroom capacity. Again, we want to also look at what that excess is, excluding those intra and inter-district transfers. And then number 6, the proximity to schools with the capacity to accommodate incoming students. So the notion of, okay, if I close school A, do the 3 closest schools have enough capacity to take on those students that you're not having to send students, you know, across town or somewhere else? And so we'll look at that piece of it as well. All right, so before we move on for this one, and I'm also conscious of time, anybody have any objections to these proposed criteria or addition?
And I don't know where this falls, so I just want to I'm super familiar with the demographics and the data for the site that I work at. 'Cause I'm the data girl for the site, so super familiar. So when you're looking at including special day classes, there's all kinds of programs that fall under special ed. Some of them are not special called special day classes. There are other programs. Will the other programs be
Yes,
included?
everything under special education.
And the other one, can impact a number of schools, is having an understanding of how many English language learners are out of school. That impacts not only potentially school enrollment, it also impacts test scores, and having an understanding of at each site about how many English language learners are at a site and how many special ed students at a site, may be very, very important when you're looking at demographics and how a school may score either in the demographic section or some of the other sections.
That'll probably come out more in the education and support services piece
So
of
I'm
it
just-
than it will here.
Okay, so I'm just,
No, appreciate it. That's
I'm noticing that there's an additional considerations, like,
moving ahead.
I'm moving ahead, but it is related to my question, because I noticed that additional consideration is percentage of students by race and ethnicity, which to me falls pretty clearly. There's impacts in other areas. It falls very clearly in demographic, and we can all look at the state scorecards and how it relates. And so, what you said about, how we're defining diverse population is really important, but we're not pulling out race and ethnicity, and I feel that that is important in a number of ways, and it's not necessarily unduplicated, like, for sure, and especially like there is overrepresentation of marginalized kids in special education, but these are really important conversations that shouldn't be missed if we're considering them. So I really wanted to advocate for that being.
And that information will be presented as part of that. There just wasn't a scoring criteria developed, because then again, how do you define that? Do you go, oh, if I have, and I'm making up a number, 20% African American and 10% Latino and 3% of this and 5% of that, does everybody agree that's diverse? Or is it, that's a hard thing? And so it's really, we want to present and provide that data so that you have it as you are looking at everything and making your decisions. But it wasn't one that we were scoring at. We were trying to find, okay, where's something that we have an established metric that's been developed that we can use as a proxy as far as the scoring is concerned, but that's definitely information, which is why it's under additional consideration that we're providing that data. So it can be part of the consideration and thought process as you're making those recommendations. That work?
So I have a question in regards to, so it has to deal with demographics. And then also with the free lunch program, and considering that that's where some of our monies come from pertaining to school. So how are we gonna be able to look at all of this and determine some of these closures when there's certain areas that have a certain demographic, right? And that if we look at it going forward, let's say they close one of those schools that have certain demographics, and they receive Title I funds, right? So then if we're looking at this and we're gonna say we're gonna close the school, now you're looking at, okay, there's gonna be more funding that will be leaving the district, possibly because now the school that would be in a certain demographic is no one, let's say we close that school. Now we're jeopardizing more financial resources by closing a school that have certain demographics and free lunch program and so forth.
We're
So how are we gonna?
We're gonna be looking at the fiscal implications. So, we're already gonna be running late in our first meeting with 6 minutes. Yeah.
So I think we're in year 3 of everybody eats for free. So has California come up with a new, you used something at the last board meeting.
Yes, so.
New terminology for that.
Alternative, we're under the community eligibility provision, now, so this is our census year, so this year, our alternative income form, which we are calling the school funding form, so that people understand that that's really what it's about. Sets our level of funding for our unduplicated pupil percentage for that these for the next 4 years.
Yeah, so I would just ask that we update our terminology.
Well, the
because
terminology is that's federal and it's gonna remain.
It's still federal?
Because they still are free and reduced price meal eligible,
Okay.
which is what the FRPM is. And so it's really about their eligibility, and the district is still needing to gather that information, even though they're giving free lunches to everyone. For these other purposes, they still need to know what students based on income are eligible for those meals. Yeah. it's a federal- Yeah. Okay. So. Can anyone? Does it not support? Oh, I still have one question.
Quisiera agregar algo, como padre de familia, he estado palpando las necesidades de los padres de familia muy de cerca en cada de una de las escuelas que he asistido, y desafortunadamente nuestros estudiantes aprenden inglés, han batallado mucho, ¿verdad?
As a parent, who's still
Palpando, como tocando, sintiendo algo.
So as a parent, he's feeling that our students who are English learners aren't receiving the appropriate academic help to get them to where they need to be at grade level. So he's nervous how that will be supported for our English learner.
Es algo muy difícil. Este cambio pienso que no hay fondos y sin embargo van a consolidar algunas escuelas, pero me gustaría que lo hicieran de la mejor manera para que nuestros estudiantes que están aprendiendo inglés no fueran hacia atrás, sino que fueran hacia adelante. Y no sé cómo lo van a ubicar en clases con más estudiantes, porque creo yo que eso perjudicaría a ellos, si dieran menos atención académica, ¿verdad? O si van a tener el personal suficiente para atender las necesidades, ¿verdad? O los programas educativos académicamente.
So he's concerned with funding as for our EL learners. Will they be subject to being placed in classrooms that are bigger? And will they be able to access the same support to continue their academic progress?
Pienso que es una información que hay que colaborar en conjunto con ustedes, con el distrito, con todo el personal de directores. ¿Cuál sería la mejor manera, verdad?
So he wants to kind of touch bases with this committee and with everyone else, how you guys can better help these students to get the proper academic support that they need.
Thank you. And yeah, that'll be part of the conversations we'll be having with the data that we'll be providing. And that's one of the reasons why the district is looking to, close some schools, because there are resources that are being spent that could be better placed in the classroom with students. And so that will help, hopefully, part of all of this process is the academic program that we're going to be providing. So for this one, is there anyone who cannot support? So that's moving forward with these criteria or with these, 6 criteria under demographics and capacity.
So we're doing thumbs up if we're good with this?
Let's go.
Thumbs up if you're good with this criteria, thumbs down if you can't support it, and in the middle, if it's like, yeah, this seems reasonable-ish, I'm kind of neutral.
Mostly thumbs up and a couple of.
The neutrals are the, because they have questions.
Wait, enough time to digest it.
Yeah.
I
I think after the next meeting, when this is presented, you'll probably be okay. And I would say this is the hardest one from a non-facilities person to wrap my head around. So,
yeah.
All right.
Is this set in stone, the rubric?
That's what we're doing right now. As soon as we have this conversation, then it will be, and I think set in stone in that we want to have an objective measure. If something comes up later in the process and the committee really does say, no, we really need to add X, Y, or Z, that is certainly part of the conversation. But we don't want to start adding them when we start seeing data and go, oh, well, wait, well, we should look at this because I know this one will do better on this or worse on that one. And so we're trying to develop some objective without the data that we can move with. But if something really comes up, it's like, hey, we really need to look at that, and everybody, again, consensus agrees, and that's something that we can.
And was this reviewed by the school district? Because I've been on other committees, not with this district, where we have our own process and our own bias and unbiased or whatever, subjective and objective kind of ways of measuring. And then it gets presented to the elected body and they don't do anything with it because it wasn't what they wanted.
It was shared with the district. I don't believe it was shared with the board.
I don't think we have that in our attachments. We can definitely make sure that it at least goes out to the board as an information item, and if they want to discuss, they can always ask for that.
So it's 7:30. Do we need to make a motion to extend the meeting in order to finish it?
Is everybody open for an extra, I was gonna say, I'm optimistic saying half an hour. And we can always carry it forward to the beginning of the next meeting if we need to. But we'd like to try to get everybody's consensus on them so that really in the next couple of meetings, we can get down to providing the data that's gonna help look at these items. So is everybody okay, or does someone have kids to get home to, or dogs to get home to, or just wants to get home to watch TV? I don't have kids or dogs at home, so.
Thumbs up if I have it, if we have a consensus.
Okay, general, all right. And remember, we're trying to look at getting the criteria set, and we're gonna be looking at all of that data and all of that information for each one.
So you just asked if we had a consensus on the demographic.
Correct.
We don't necessarily have a consensus. When I looked around the room, so we had.
Well, let's try that
We
again.
had
So,
the only one that had some neutrals, but we didn't have any.
yeah, I saw mostly thumbs up and a couple of.
Yeah. Okay, so you want to just do that again, just to make sure we.
Okay. If we can get a thumbs up if we're okay, we have a consensus on moving forward with these scoring criteria. Okay. All right, facilities. The first criteria, facilities are in good condition. We're gonna be basing that on the cost of the facilities needs and proposed modernization and construction projects. So the district did a master plan and they said this campus needs, $500 million in order to fix the roofs and the air conditioning and whatever else might be needed. And there are some proposed projects and what those costs of those projects are. So we'll be looking at those. 8, modernization, construction, or other projects that were recently completed. So you might have a school that, yes, it needs $500 million worth of work, and that's because the district hasn't touched it since it was first built. Versus another school might only need $5 million worth, but that's because it had a $50 million renovation last year. And so we want to be able to look at not only what the needs are, but how much money has actually been invested in that campus, because you don't want to, again, disadvantage a campus just because they haven't put any money into it. And so we want to be able to look at both of those things as you're making your consideration. Third one, total historical investment. I jumped ahead. That was number 9, total historical investments. 8, we just want to look at things that were recently completed. I think to Ross's point, if you had a brand new building that was put up last year, we need to realize, if we close that school down, the district just spent $20 million on it. That's something we need to keep in mind. So that's number 8. Number 9 is, okay, how much has actually been spent on that campus historically, as we can find that information. 10, unique facilities not found at other school sites. The notion here is there's something on that campus that if you close that campus, it's going to be a facility that's lost to the district. The kids won't be able to use it and it's not replicated elsewhere. So we want to know what those are. 11, support spaces. We're talking cafeterias, multi-purpose room, playgrounds, libraries, etc. Have sufficient capacity to meet current and projected enrollment. So if you have a school and you say, yeah, it has a multi-purpose room, it can only fit 100 kids in it. That campus has a capacity of 500. We want to know those things because again, do you really want to put your monies and effort on a school site that's not big enough to actually or support the students that are on that campus, so that are projected to be on that campus. Number 12, environmental factors affect current or future use of the property. Are there earthquake faults running down the middle of any of your campuses? Is there a high-speed rail right next door that if it derails might harm students? We want to look at those types of things that are in the environment and adjacent to the school site. They might impact the school sites because, for example, the easiest one, California, earthquake faults. You might not want to build a brand new school or fix it up or build a new building on a school site that has an earthquake fault that it's going to come down when that big one hits, whenever that happens. And then lastly, if there are any leases or other outside uses that are currently utilizing the site for generating income. So if there's a lease on the property for some use for the next 50 years, will closing that school site impact that? If there's a lease that's generating money on that site, will closing that school site impact that, or is that a positive? So those are the kinds of things that we want to look at when we're looking at this. So any questions, thoughts, or, yeah?
So, it has to do with, going back to the historical aspect, you know, we have some schools in our district that have been around like forever. And so are those things that we're gonna be taking into consideration, considering the longevity of the history? That's the first question. And then the other one has to do with, environmental factors and fires and so forth. And then also with the city of Santa Rosa, got a lot going on. And they're building a lot of apartment complexes, things of that nature. So how are we gonna implement the potential people that could move into the city, considering we have a lot of apartments that are being built around the town? Is that gonna be in consideration?
So potential apartments that would show up in the demographics, so the projections would show the demographic would have looked at where things are being built, and that would be the number of kids, so that's over there.
Okay, so they already included that?
That would be, yes, in the
Okay.
projection.
The master site plan, the architects that came and visited each site, they said that because we asked the same question, they said, we looked at where they were zoned in those areas, and, I mean, could there be an apartment complex in another neighboring school district, and do they choose to go to that district? We couldn't count on that. The ones that are in our footprints and what's projected, they said they counted those.
Yeah, because like downtown, they have that big high rise that they're building now. That's potential for,
So,
you know, kids.
yes. And I'm sorry, the first
It
question?
had to do with the environmental factors like fires and things of
Yes.
that nature. We have some schools that's in, you know, the mountains and whatnot. And so I know insurance for those, you know, particular areas it's just astronomical. So it's something that we're gonna be looking at too when it comes to.
You'll catch it slightly differently.
Okay.
Here, you would see, you know, if it's in a high fire and hazard zone, et cetera, would capture here, the cost part of it would show up in the fiscal side of it and the cost to run that.
Okay.
I'm not sure if any of these capture the idea of shared facilities with the city. The vast majority of our school sites are directly adjacent to city parks.
Yeah,
And
that's
is that
the
captured there? And then,
outside uses currently utilizing the site, so we'll talk about. all
well,
of
it's not them using us, it's us using
Yeah.
them, right?
But yeah.
And the same is true with like the Ridgeway Swim Center. I don't know what our status is with that, but it was built as a shared project. So I think, I'm not sure that concepts are.
Yeah, under the leases or other outside,
Okay.
use, yeah, we'll cover. Thanks.
Yeah, just a question about the weighting. We haven't talked about the scoring methodology on, at least on the sheet here. It says yes, no, you know, 1 point, 2 points. That sort of the intention, or will some of these have higher weights than other weights when they go and score them?
So that's why there's two scores. There's the first score is the yes or no. So it's a 1 or 2.
Puts it in
Just what
category.
puts it in that category. And then some of them have the weighted score. And typically how those weights are, for example, facilities are in good, facilities are in good condition based on cost of the facility. I believe, where did that go? That the weighted score of that is the one that has the most expensive facilities needs is gonna get the highest score. So there are 6 elementary schools. Elementary school with the highest need will get the number 6, the next one 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And so all of them, when you see it says rank down, it's the one with the highest and then the rank from there. Yeah, and so again, at the end of the day, the one with the highest score would be for all the criteria that we've looked at, the one that's, you know, at the higher likelihood of, that would make sense based on all this data, that would be one that we might consider.
I just wanted to like make space for the fact within that there can be higher fiscal impact for things that create more accessibility for disabled students. So for example, if an elementary school made a point to choose a new playground surface that a wheelchair can roll across, as opposed to wood chips, which for some ungodly reason are considered ADA compliant, but as a parent to a child with a wheelchair, you cannot push across those. They're going to appear like a very large expense, and someone might argue, oh, it's only serving a couple kids, but there is, there is a greater sort of weight to be put towards accessibility, and I don't see accessibility sort of put out. It could be the same for technology within the classrooms that allows better, visual or audio accessibility for certain students. So I didn't know if that could be weighted somewhere or just held.
We'll make a note of that. I think some of that will come out in the fact, I mean, part of it is the district has district-wide standards. So as they're upgrading playgrounds, they're gonna, I don't know what surface they're using, but they're gonna slowly make sure that all of them have that same surface. So I think some of those things, it's at the moment, it might have one or the other, but that expense, if it were to happen, would be equal across. Some of the other things, I think when we're looking at the costs, we are pulling out program-specific things for some of those, because again, the district is deciding what program to put in what campus, and you don't want to disadvantage one because it has more students that need X, Y, or Z, because that's where the district decided to put it, and not because that is something that's a consequence of actual physical.
So based on what you just said, because my students, they were, artsy people, and so they went to art class. And so if we was to, let's say we close Santa Rosa and then our class is still there, is that something that's gonna still be viable? And then if they shift it to a different school, how are we gonna get, students, but right now some students are bused to school, would they be considering busing if they move a particular program to a site that they would not typically go to?
That's part of what we'll be looking at. Yes.
I am kind of going back, but I'm wondering if there's latitude, because it doesn't feel like there's a tight Robert's Rules of Order, but I'm gonna say something about the demographics and capacity. So I see this first, and it came up in this conversation, looking at facilities and talking about enrollment potential with new construction. I see, item 1 talks about it's not projected, or it is projected to remain low, which is kind of the opposite of it is projected to grow or has growth potential. So I guess I don't see that language specifically as one of the metrics we're looking at is there growth potential embedded in that campus that we should be considering?
Potential meaning in the physical space, or that more kids might be.
Students on campus. Yeah.
So that will come out, I think, in the demographic data, because the demographers have been looking at where that growth is coming from, and it will show whether or not that campus is projected to grow into the future.
Great. I guess I just don't see it in the in our qualifying metrics of how we're scoring it, so that's why it came to me.
I think it'll show up in number 1, because for example, the projected enrollments, making what up, might right now be at 200, but the demographer is showing that it's going to be at 500. So when we look at that capacity, the capacity will be much lower and less than that 70% threshold, because it actually is going to be filled with those students, so the excess capacity would be less. So that's where it
score with that you need to correct. Second part of it.
Yeah. So it will get captured. So, and some of this, I think, yeah, once we start to put in data, a little bit, you're like, oh, the light bulbs hopefully will click and go off. But on the facilities, thumbs up, we're good with moving with these, neutral, or he's being stingy with that. Thumbs up.
I don't give a freebie.
Yeah, all right. The next section is gonna be educational/student support services. So number 14, schools do not meet performance, which is the lowest 2 performance levels in 2 or more state priorities. So we'll go into a lot more detail, but quick synopsis, the state has what it calls the California Schools Dashboard. And it has, and this is the metric that it's using now for looking at the school sites. Before, you just had that API score, the academic performance indicator that was, or index, that was based on kids took school, tests. And if they scored high, low, they gave you a number based on that school, and that was it. The state is looking much more comprehensively, not only at test scores, but also again, the English learners, it's look and how they are, performing or at school sites. It's looking at chronic absenteeism, it's looking at suspension rates, it's looking at a lot more holistically across the school sites, and it has given them a scoring based on some criteria that it has developed on from blue being the highest all the way down to red being the lowest. And so the notion here is if a school doesn't meet two or it's in those two lowest ones, then they would be receiving points on the metric.
And with those points, so if a school had a greater number of students who did not meet performance and a greater number of students who were below, would that give them higher points, meaning that that's the school that should be considered to be closed because it's non-performing?
So we wouldn't be looking necessarily at the number of students, just whether or not that metric, there is, like I mentioned, chronic absenteeism, there's suspension rates, there are the math and English language arts tests, et cetera. And so a school has been provided a color code on that wheel just across the board. And so if that school is one or has two or more of those, then they would get a point, and yes, it would raise them higher on that.
And you wouldn't be comparing a Title I school like Shreks. Exactly, I mean, just saying, if you're looking at academic data, I mean, schools like schools, it makes sense.
But again, the notion here is, yeah, on the criteria, it would show up as that point, but part of that conversation is, hey, it is a Title I school, we need to take that into account, that received that score here, but there's other mitigating circumstances.
On the demographic side, it probably shows up completely different, so.
They could be doing very well.
Exactly.
Schools like,
This is, one of, 20 or over 20 of these that we're looking at. And so that's just one of the information and pieces of consideration. Kathy first.
And that's, for me, going back to the point of having an understanding at school site of what the current school student population makeup is with some of those subgroups are really, really important. Because it's a well-rounded information piece to understand that if you have a school that's 70% English language learners, you may be getting a lot of points in this section, for example. And it just is it is an information piece to understand what's happening at that school. And having an understanding of what kind of student population that school is working with to get them to where they need to be from a performance.
And again, the main driver of this is to provide you data and information so that you can make those decisions and have those nuanced conversations. If it's not, it's scored high, close that school, it's automatic. Well, then why are we here? It's really to provide you that data so that you can have those conversations.
And again, it's one data point, and I always caution people not to take one data point out of context with the other 20 data points. And I know that that's hard, as you said in here.
It is hard, and because the state dashboard like spoon feeds us, I can open up for any school in the state and find out how many Black students, if there's a disproportionate amount of Black students that are being suspended at a particular school, for example, or if English language learners are highly represented at a school, but performing very poorly in English learners. So with that, I just want to be sure, I would love to see that again pulled out. I know it's technically demographics to say race, ethnicity, and other of these marginalized groups, but we absolutely have the data. And so it feels like that would be its own.
That's the data that's being presented.
that's the data that's being presented, but it does feel like it should be part of the actual, scoring.
How,
So,
how did you propose scoring that? What did that criteria look like?
I mean, I think we would need to maybe have a discussion about that.
Yeah, that it has to do with, you know, being
I'm gonna give
culturally.
you 1 second. Because we had another hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think mine goes directly with what they're saying. I think for me, what I'm hearing is that this piece doesn't need to be ranked because it is showing like, oh, the school is not performing as well. If we're looking at the size of the school, the facilities of the school, I personally don't feel that looking at the test scores is appropriate. I think we're looking at size, space, for me, and I don't know if that's, it sounds like that's where it's coming from down there. I don't feel that this should be part of the ranking. Maybe putting that information on each of the schools so we can have the data, but not to rank it.
Just one point of clarification, it's not just test scores. Just one.
But no, it ultimately number 14, 15, and 16 all come down to performance.
On the flip side of that, I mean, just to be honest, we all know, people in this county drive ungodly hours every day taking their kid to some other place because of 14, 15, and 16. And if you're in the high school world, my high school coach, we have kids going all over this place, not for academics, because we have lots of great offerings in this county. They go where the sports are. That's a big draw. And I'm a teacher. I mean, we do more than offer a business service. I'm not a Target. But they do look at us as a product and they have choices and they go places. And so we were mentioning at some point, like some of our sports fields are not the same. Because what you offer I want to see our district grow. And I feel like when we look at any of these categories, we need to say, what Allison was kind of saying, it's like, what's your growth potential? Because there's a draw potential at all of our sites possibly have something that they would draw kids from outside the district to come here. And I'm thinking, well, how do we stay sustainable also for the next 20 years? So not every site, there's just a complicated, it's not just test scores, but man, we have so many parents who go, oh, what they look at that on the dashboard, they make a choice. And it's not fair to the teachers, the kids, the parents, what really goes on those sites, or the neighborhoods. But sadly, it is a factor.
But my concern, if we're using this as a ranking, schools on a certain side of this city,
I'm on that side.
my school, and I just feel that if we're looking at consolidating schools, we're looking at students and teachers right now with this, and I don't think that this minimal is enough where it'll make a huge impact on some schools. I don't think it's what we're looking at when we're consolidating. That's my personal opinion.
I hear a lot of wisdom in what you're saying. I see the fiscal impact of 14, 15, and 16, so that's where I do lean into it, feels appropriate to be reviewing it. If we close a school, that is going to cause families to make choices outside of our district. That's going to impact us fiscally, and I think that's what we're here to do, is to try to help, be more fiscally solvent in making the recommendation. So that's just the thought.
And making sure that I'm sorry.
I wanted to reiterate what Adrian said, because number 15 is a big issue amongst our English learning community, and what Kathy has mentioned. And we don't even need to look at the data. It's just obvious that if you go from southwest on these maps to northeast, the diverse population or the students of color are in southwest from Santa Rosa, and you work your way up. It's not accurate, but you go to the northeast part of this city and it's less diverse and higher test scores. So I do believe that this kind of sway, even though it's just 3 out of 20 points, grading that is going to, I think, really hurt our students of color and communities of color in Santa Rosa.
I'm just wondering if there's a way to bake into this, because it is leaning. We have caveats for other qualifiers, like the, isn't projected to continue losing enrollment. So is there a way to embed, some metric of percent of taking into account, and they have no, more than X percent EL enrollments or special services enrollments to kind of help balance, that metric?
So why don't we?
Yeah, and so what I wanted to say has to be related to being culturally responsive, right? And so even though we can close these schools, add a school, do whatever we're gonna do, are the students gonna get what he said? Are they gonna get the necessary tools that they need to succeed? So no matter where they go in this district, they're gonna have the support. So if I could be assured that that's what's gonna happen, then I would feel a little bit more comfortable in saying, okay, we can possibly close certain schools. But unless I get that assurance, I would feel some type of way about saying yes to this stuff.
So why don't we do this for these four? Three. So my understanding is we're talking about 14, 15, and 16. That's the, right? So let us look at these. See if we can.
You can lump 17 and 18 because it all depends on where, if you take a program over here and put it over here, are those kids gonna feel comfortable going to that school district, right? So this whole thing.
Well, 17 and 18.
Then you have to have the consideration that the kids with the special education, they have hard time to readjust from one school to another. So they usually have let's say from kinder to sixth grade. And for them, they're gonna feel more comfortable in the same environment, the same classroom, the same teachers. And it's better for them to keep them, at least for that period of time on these schools.
So the district-wide special programs, it's not special education programs. Special education programs, schools, that has to be provided. That's a portion of the basic education for all students. When we're talking about district-wide and special programs, all schools have art classes. All of them, or only these two have marching bands. This one has, it's those kinds of special programs, or this is the only school in the district that offers this magnet program for these kids. Those are those programs. Special education programs, that is part of basic education. That is not considered something that can be moved, relocated. That's about serving those students. So this is really those types of programs. So if you close down that school, are you going to lose that magnet, or could it be placed somewhere else? Or no, they had to build a special science lab at that campus for that magnet. So if you move it, you can't have that program. That's what 17 and 18 are looking at. Okay.
I'd just like to verbally say, I think that it's important to keep in mind that schools that traditionally score lower they have a greater need for socioeconomically disenfranchised student bodies. And so when we start having discussions about ranking something like this as very important, and if a school was to close because of it, now you're moving the most needy students to another campus. And so I would be very concerned that we would need to have some type of conversation about transportation in our district, which we are lacking. And so I just want to say that I appreciate what everyone said, and I really want to keep that in mind because we have not discussed that. And I know you have the fiscal and other impacts, and I looked through it here, but in no way does it talk about the fiscal impact of our students who fall under the poverty line in Sonoma County.
So we'll bring this one back. All right.
I assume that we do not have consensus about this particular. I mean, that was, yeah, I feel like I assume I know that, but I think that in fairness to the process, I shouldn't say that. I appreciate the conversation. Yeah, I know it's hard.
Fiscal and other impacts. So we're looking at existing safety concerns regarding traffic and safe routes to school. Safety concerns regarding traffic or safe routes to school if students are relocated. So right now, everything's great, but you move these kids there and that intersection that's been fine now turns into a nightmare. So we want to look at that. Would require transportation for relocated students to new school sites. So we want to look at that. Have there been any alternative uses identified if the site is closed? So has the district had conversations? Do they have leases? Any of those kinds of things? If that site were to be closed, we want to look at that. 23, proximity to non-district schools that can capture district students where the school site is closed. That goes into, you have neighboring districts that might have a school right there at the boundary. And if you were to close this school, they're all gonna go, no, I'm not gonna go to another, I'm just gonna go to that district next door, that charter school, or whatever that may be. 24, the district would benefit from net savings if closed. And so we'll look at an analysis of, here's the cost, not including staff, because again, that is dependent on where the district decides to put programs. It's really about what's it costing to operate that campus physical operation. And then a per student operating cost, again, excluding that staff. So those are the criteria that we're looking at on the fiscal side, and you are correct, it doesn't address the student end of the fiscal. This is really about the district's, the fiscal implications of this on the district's finances.
Yes, I have two items that I didn't see up here. Number one, and it's probably more have more impacts at the elementary school district, but I know that there are some elementary schools in our district where there's no conversation about parents' mode of transportation. There are some elementary schools where the majority of parents walk their children to school and pick them up. So when I'm looking at traffic and safe routes, I made the assumption through how the words were in the sentence that we were talking about cars. And if a school closed where 70% of our parents are walking their kids to school and they have to walk their kids an additional 1.5 miles to get them to school, that's important information to capture. So I just want that parent mode of transportation.
So in school parlance, safe routes to school is what's looking at that.
Okay, so just somehow. And then secondly, proximity, 23 has to do with competition. And competition, and again, I'm more familiar with competition with high school choice, less knowledgeable about middle school and elementary, although that exists as well. Proximity is like the school is 0.5 miles away from XYZ school. That's not necessarily the only factor in competition. So I know for the school I work at, there's 4 high schools that compete for students outside of the district, for students that are in the Southwest area. And some of them may be close and some of them may be further away, but there are active, aggressive marketing campaigns targeting our district students. So if a choice was made to close XYZ campus and there's 6 active marketing campaigns, we can't make the assumption that if that school closes, all of those students would suddenly be coming to, would spread around our district school. There really needs to be looked at kind of what marketing campaigns are in play and what are realistic numbers. So it's not just proximity.
So what you're trying to get at is just really trying to find out what other non-district schools could capture district students.
Absolutely.
Bigger than just.
And it's just not mileage, not just mileage.
Yes. And mine has to do with like the staff and teachers and admin. So when we're thinking about this process and we're thinking about closing schools, are we gonna be keeping that? How is that something that's gonna come into the play here? Like, how are we gonna figure out who stays, who goes? Is that something that is gonna be looked at in this process? Because there are students that are like married.
I'm gonna say no, and I'm gonna say no. We're not making that.
We're not making that decision in this.
Okay.
We're trying to, it's not people. I mean, we're trying to very clearly say,
But that would affect how parents, if they're gonna choose to, if they know there's a teacher they really like and that teacher goes into another district, that parent could possibly follow that teacher.
But there's it's a very, it's not simply, in fact, just a school closes, for example, those people are no longer with the districts because of how the collective bargaining works. It could be that that teacher's been here for 30 years and she has more rights than another district that's only, or teacher that's been here 1 year. And that 1 year teacher from a school that's staying open is the one who's gonna leave and the 30-year teacher gets moved. So it's not a simple, everybody on that school site, that's who's out the door. So that's why this is not, we're looking at, oh, yes, these positions would go, but we can't say that you, Yvette, are the one who's gonna be going. There's no way to do that.
And there's a whole different group that's gonna get involved.
That's a different. We are officially over time on our extended amount of time. And so, not to-
I think that's strategic.
Any other
They want you to be hot.
questions, thoughts? And I think we addressed what you had to go. Can we get, yes, generally these fiscal impacts look good? The numbers are easy, it's like, yeah. And then as, Andrea noted earlier, these aren't scored, but this is information that we are going to provide because it's information that you need to keep in mind as you're making these decisions and having these conversations. This is information you need that's kind of, you know, a broad overview for each one of those other things. And so it's not scored, but this is information that we will be providing. All right. So we have 7 meetings, well, technically 8 meetings scheduled. If we need an additional one, if we need to push. The idea is that each one of those criteria just went through, there will be a meeting to cover each one of those in detail. Meeting number 6 is then really looking at that overall scoring prioritization, having that conversation about, all right, based on what we've learned, what we know, what schools do we believe we should recommend to the board for closure. And then number 7, as I said, we're gonna be putting together a report throughout this entire process of outlining the process of what you're doing, the conversations we're having, the information that's being provided. And so we'll be providing that report to you in advance so you can review it and go, yeah, nope, this matches. Oh, wait, you know, we needed to add that piece of information, whatever that is. Getting your authority to make any edits or finalize it. And then that's the reports that Ben and Christian and others who'd like to join them will be presenting to the board.
Then you said there'd be, we agreed to reading some materials before we came to meetings. Does that mean, like, for instance, before the September 9th meeting, you'll be emailing us something to review in PDF form or something, and we should then talk about it once we get here, or we'll get it fresh?
Be providing the presentations in advance, so you'll at least be able to take a peek at it. And then we'll be presenting it and having those conversations in this room.
And everything will be attached in simply just like our board agenda, so there will be attachments there, the presentation. So things like that.
Oh, sorry, oh. I missed that.
Yeah, next meeting.
Shut. We don't have control over it.
All right, so that's that. So the next section on the item was visitor or public comments, and we have one blue card from Shane Ramey. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Hi, thanks. I'm Shane Ramey. I've got 4 daughters at Santa Rosa French American Charter School. I appreciate everyone in this room is really smart and putting a lot of detail into the thought here. There's two things actually I wanted to point out that weren't on the methodology spreadsheet. Where Santa Rosa French American Charter School is a language immersion school. And so the students there are exposed to French all day long. And I live in the neighborhood. And a lot of the people in the neighborhood bring their kids to that school because it's walkable. And a lot of them have told me, well, I never intended to send my kid to a French school, but it's great. And, you know, the teachers are great. There's a really good parent community, but I probably wouldn't have chosen to go to a French school, you know, if it wasn't so close. So I'm worried that if we move the French school and combine it with another school, there'll be a lot of parents who say, well, that's not a convenient location, even though my kid's now in third grade, I'm not gonna have them go to fourth grade. And there's no one to fill that spot, no one's going to suddenly learn all the foundational French up to third grade, so you're gonna have sort of an exodus, where the community of the school is gonna get frayed. And I fear, some international, bringing teachers in to speak native French, so are they gonna be able to recruit these teachers in, given that the student base is declining? That's one consideration. The other is, it's not gonna be a French immersion school if they're sharing a campus and they're going to recess. The recess, half the school speaking English. So I would urge you to either move the French American Charter School all at once, or just leave it where it is.
That's interesting. All right, so we are back here on September 9th at 5:30, and we'll delve into demographics and capacity. And again, thank you, especially thank you since we've already started breaking our norms and running.
But we could bring personal plan to plug in this argument there.
Hold on, what? September, So we wanna.
2 seconds.
Christian. At
8:11.
Meeting adjourned.
And